We'll start by little meditation where you can now just gently close your eyes and place your hands onto your heart, or one hand on your heart, another on your belly, and start breathing deeply. Inhale and exhale. And if you are a Reiki practitioner or a teacher, you can connect to Reiki. If you are not, you can simply allow the energy to flow through you, feeling in your hands your connection to your own self, connecting to your breathing, and imagining this beautiful white light coming down from the sky, from the space above, through your crown chakra, into your heart, all the way to your center of your being, to your hara. That is where we connect with Reiki energy. And just allow that energy to permeate throughout your whole body, your physical body, your mental body, your spiritual body. And with every deep inhale, allow that light to expand and to radiate from you to the space around you, filling up your whole room. This beautiful light, having the capacity to balance our energies. And really bring us calm. Each breath deepens this connection and brings us closer to that source from which we all come, feeling the connection to ourselves and others, tapping into love, understanding, and mutual respect that we share for each other. And I invite you, once you find this sweet spot of love within your heart, to stay in it throughout the presentation and to carry it as you go on after we finish tonight. Now, when you're ready, you can open your eyes, and we'll start by welcoming our panel members, Rosemary Cameron and then Andonnia Gotsi. And I will introduce Rosemary, our first speaker. So Rosemary is a gifted energy aware child, and she got in touch with that energy when she was young. She used her hands to guide this healing energy to animals and people, and it was her natural instinct. In 1996, she was guided to the Usui system of Reiki to formalize the use of healing hands while she was volunteering at the Cancer and Natural Therapy Foundation. She went on to facilitate a support group for several years within this foundation for those with life-threatening illnesses to have an opportunity to talk about their situation and to receive regular Reiki sessions in a safe environment. By the year 2000, Rosemary gained Reiki 2 and 3 and became a Reiki master teacher. And she started teaching family members of those who were unwell so that they could assist their loved ones with Reiki healing energy within the home. For Rosemary, Reiki is a way of life, and she is using it to support others. In many cases, she noted that Reiki assisted in reducing the fear of the diagnosis of a potentially terminal illness by allowing the body to work at its optimum, thereby bringing about remission. There is no exception and no judgment, just pure Reiki support. Reiki has coincided with her life as a medium, in that she recognized that Reiki linked the person passing from this life to the high frequency of spirit to make the transition easier and diminish the feeling of helplessness in the family members and loved ones left here on earth. While Rosemary utilizes Reiki every day in many varied situations, from pre-birth through to transition from this earth, her family Scottish tradition has always been to stay with the dying family members or a friend in the days prior to, during, and in the hours after their passing, supporting them with Reiki. Her experience is that it supports an acceptance, brings peace, allays fear, and allows the family to be a part of the loving transition. Rosemary's saying is, Reiki is silently beautiful. And now I will pass the baton to Rosemary, who will present, and she will share her experience. I will stop sharing the presentation because she will be speaking to us directly. And Rosemary, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's quite an honour to be able to speak to some lovely, like-minded people who are just so in tune with the same things that I am, I'm sure. With Reiki and the gift of mediumship, I've spent a lot of time devoting myself to those who are who have terminal illnesses, and through their transition leading up to what we call death, physical death, and in the hours following that. I think that a lot of the time that I have spent, especially at the Cancer and Natural Therapy Foundation, I learnt so much. I think I had a concept in my mind of what I thought being faced with a terminal illness would be like, but I had no idea really. Once I started speaking to the people that were faced with this, and many of them came to the foundation after doing all sorts of other treatments that hadn't worked, and this was their last option. They thought they'd turn to something different. And so we often had to say goodbye to people that we had grown very close to and had built up a lovely close rapport with. But many times too, we saw that Reiki actually made a big difference in their transition to remission. And so that was a wonderful thing to see as well. I think being a volunteer opened my eyes to realization that through a lot of these stages, going through a terminal illness and building up to the final stage, it's so traumatic on the families, and it's so traumatic naturally on the person going through it. And conversation is often lacking about the feelings surrounding that transition and the process going into death. It's such a painful one for families to discuss, and yet the person facing death, I learned, desperately wants to speak about it, desperately wants to be able to verbalize their feelings, their emotions. And so for me to have that support group, which is a wonderful thing to set up if anyone has the chance to do it. And I had facilitated a couple of groups. One of them was a morning session for the people who were facing a terminal illness, and we would get together. I would just allow them to speak and say all the things that they wanted to do and say, and it was wonderful to see them sharing their ideas, their inner thoughts, and then supporting each other, which brought about a very important stage for them as well. Then we would pause for a cuppa, and then we'd line up 4 or 5 Reiki tables, and I had taught the majority of them Reiki as well, and so they would take it in turns of being on the Reiki table and receiving Reiki, and the peace and the contentment that Reiki brought to them was just absolutely incredible. I think the other session that I facilitated was an evening session for family members, and I had taught a lot of the family members Reiki as well, so that they could do the Reiki sessions at home as well, and that was a bonding within itself. I think at this stage it's probably important for us to all ask ourselves what is healing. So many times we seem to think that healing is making the body well again, whole again, perfect. And yet healing on the physical level is not always possible. We are physical beings, and the body does eventually break down. And there are a lot of times where it is just not possible to get through the stages of illness in the body or damage to the body, whether that be through accident or whatever. So we have to look at healing in a different light, and that light to me is allaying fear, helping support that understanding of a process, whatever that belief system is in that person, what is that needs support and guidance for them. And so often it is on the spiritual side, it's actually coming to terms with what their belief system is, whether they thought they ever had one or they didn't. It comes around to starting to think about where they stand with that. So Reiki as a high frequency it provides the body with what it needs, and whether that is gracefully and beautifully coming to acceptance and then passing on from this physical realm, or whether it's just having the words to say to loved ones that have never been spoken. There are so many aspects to this, and I think I came across that contrast when I find that, as Slavica mentioned before, that working with pregnant ladies and the new babies and seeing the joy that surrounds a new being transitioning into this world, and the happiness and the bonding, and then the contrast of being with somebody prior to their transition out of this world. And I thought, it is such a big, we welcome a baby in with the joy and the high energy, and we should be able to do the same when somebody transitions from this world, because so often there's a heaviness, there's fear and unspoken words for fear of upsetting somebody. And I don't want to leave this world on a depressed, sad situation. I would love to have singing in my room. I would love to feel the joy around me. I would love to have loved ones reminding me of the good times we had. And I think that's such an important thing. So I think that made me look very differently around it. And I find too, having that joy of telling stories and reminding of the good times and the funny times and the sad times, it raises the frequency in the room, and that Reiki frequency that we are constantly giving throughout that time, it just rides and flows through and changes so many aspects. One particular aspect, I know when my son was passing away, he had pancreatic cancer, and he passed away in 2017, and he was 49, so he, you know, not a child, and he'd never really spoken much about his belief system, and we were given the opportunity to stay with him the 4 days in the palliative care hospital, because we lived so far away from where he was. So my daughter and I stayed there, and of course it was just non-stop Reiki, which even the nurses coming into the room were saying how beautiful the energy felt. They didn't know why, they didn't know what we were doing. So one of us would sit back and do the Reiki while the other would chat or talk, and we just found there was just so much ease of talk, and my son managed to open up and say so many things that as a male, men often don't open up to those tender things, and so that was a beautiful side to it. So for 4 days and nights we stayed there in a room just up the hallway from him, and it was a very special time. And the nurses would often come in and say, look, why don't you take a break and you know, go down to the shops or go somewhere and just have a break away. But to us, Reiki was carrying us as well. It was healing for us, and it was healing for him to let go of a lot of fear that he was going through. And I had to say to them a couple of times, look, thank you for your concern, but I nurtured him into this world, and now, as much as I don't want to, it's my choice to nurture him safely out of this world, which I got the opportunity to do. And it was a beautiful time, as upsetting as it was, but it was that Reiki energy that carried us through. It was healing in so many other ways. So again, not on the physical, but certainly on the emotional and the spiritual side. And in my experience as a medium, I've also found that to have that ease, to ease somebody out of this world, the transition and the contact with them later, as a medium, because I do have the gift to be able to see spirit after death. And I have just found that working through a beautiful process of acceptance and feeling loved is an amazing help for them as well in their transition to be loved. My brother-in-law passed away a year ago now, and he had been estranged from all of his family and kept in contact with me off and on. But he was always moving house, and he was always losing his phones. So sometimes I couldn't contact him. And I found that I would send him Reiki distantly, not knowing where he was, but just knowing that I could do that. And then out of the blue, one day I got a call from a friend of his saying that he had leukemia and only had a couple of weeks to live and would love to see me and my daughter. So we packed up a 4 hours drive to the Bush Nursing Hospital that he was in, and we spent, you know, a few hours with him, and then we came back home. And a few days later we'd go back, but we realised that he was getting close to death. And he'd led a difficult life. He was estranged from, as I said, all of his family, so he had nobody else but us. But the process of going back there and staying with him again for 3 or 4 days prior to his passing, it was quite a beautiful process of seeing him unfold many things that he had regrets about and he had bitterness about. And we didn't expect him to speak. We just gave him that beautiful Reiki healing. And there were times where he didn't realise that it was still flowing, but one of us would be still doing it. And he flowed through that beautifully. The day before he passed, he had been unconscious. They had been giving him morphine. But the day before he passed, he all of a sudden was quite alert, and he looked out the window and said, "Rosemary, will you take me out in the sunshine? I'd love to go outside." So my daughter and I did. We had him put into a wheelchair, and we walked him outside, sat in the sunshine, and he just talked and talked and talked. And it was as if the Reiki had just allowed this conversation to flow. And he talked about the past, and we laughed about good times. He talked about things that possibly he could have done differently, but he didn't, and maybe that was part of his journey. And after a little while, he started talking a little bit about what he was facing. And so I was able to just pose a few questions about, what do you feel that might be? And open the door for him to speak. And he actually talked about it at length and come to the conclusion that he felt there was something else, but the fear of the passing, of letting go of life, was the difficult part. So the following day, he had lapsed into a coma again, and morphine was increased. And so we sat with him, and a couple of his mates were in the room, and of course they didn't know what Reiki was, and we weren't about to try to explain it at that stage. But they just sat in the energy and enjoyed it. They'd never been with anybody who was dying before. So we were actually moving then, because there was no verbal conversation with my brother-in-law, but we had moved beyond that. And I often find that with people who are passing, that the conversation is no longer there, but the link is still there through Reiki and through just, when we send our distant healing to somebody on a quantum level, that reaches them. And I have, from experience, realized that sending that conversation on the same quantum level reaches as well. And as he lay there in his last hours, we were both feeling, my daughter and I, she has a medium as well, we were both feeling that he was too afraid to let go. So I knew that she was talking to him, she was holding his hand, and I knew she was on another level, quietly with her inner voice talking to him. And every now and then he'd have a smile on his face, and he'd go, with his eyes shut. So I knew that he was picking up on what she was saying. And what she was saying to him was that his mother had stepped in. His mother was there for him, waiting to take his hand, which I could see as well, and a couple of other loved ones. And then with that process, she said to him, "It's just like stepping out of an old overcoat that you no longer need, and stepping out into the safety of the warmth and the love. It's as easy. Do you want to try it?" And I at that stage, I didn't know what she'd said, but I heard again, and it was only a short time after that we saw a beautiful smile on his face, and he took his last breath. And to me, that proved that there is that inner dialogue. Never give up on what we can do with that Reiki energy. If we are sending distant healing, we can send distant dialogue and support and love, and introduce them to that transition of loved ones. Now, that might not be their particular belief system, so it's about handling it however it is for that person. I never intrude on what the belief system is. I allow them to talk about it and say what it is for them. So I've found that so often my husband had dementia, and he was nonverbal for a couple of years before he passed away. And I realised that communication was still there. I could give him Reiki and talk to him on another level, and he would just look at me and smile. So I knew that he understood. So this Reiki frequency that we have the gift of working with it goes beyond what I think I can still understand. But it's having the proof, it's having the experience of being able to. So that's why my motto is that Reiki is silently beautiful, because it doesn't require words. It requires the love and the support, and just to be on that other level of just allowing something to just simply be, and to unfold in such a beautiful way. So I've found that it's been a real honour to work with so many people. As the past, I've been with friends and relatives and even parents of friends that I've never met, and I've been there, and I just find it's an honour, and it's something that I think is such a valuable process that we forget about. So I think that's about all from me at the moment. But thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosemary. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
That was really beautiful. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and experience. It's much appreciated. And now I am going to introduce Andonnia. Andonnia has also had experience in this area, and Andonnia is experienced holistic healer and teacher, and she's from a long line of healers on her mother's side of the family, where her grandmother was the village healer and herbalist back in Greece. And as a child, her mother would instruct her about plants and their uses. Andonnia had psychic experiences from an early age, but her formal training did not begin until 1982, when she began taking courses in psychic development. Andonnia is a qualified social worker and family counselor, dispute resolution mediator, a teacher, as well as studying therapeutic massage and lomi lomi. In the early 1980s, Andonnia studied psychic development with the friend Napier and participated in the first psychic fair with Fran. In 1991, she completed her Reiki levels 1 and 2 with Beth Gray. And in 2004 and 5, she studied at the College of Psychic Studies in London and completed their accredited healing course. On her return from living in London for 9 years in 2005, she became a student at Alpha Omega College and met her second Reiki teacher, Raymond Le Mans, with whom she completed her Reiki master training in 2007. Between 2007 and 9, Andonnia was a co-director of Alpha Omega College, and Andonnia's other Reiki teachers are Fran Steen, Hyakuta Minamoto, and Sally Vane. Andonnia was a member of the ARC Committee of Management, Committee of Management for over 10 years. And she has also been on the Lakota spiritual pathway since 1991, participating in sacred ceremonies that honor Mother Earth and acknowledge the connectedness of all living things to help bring balance and harmony to all of creation. Andonnia works with her clients in partnership with unconditional love and compassion for their journey to well-being, supporting them to embrace and reach their highest potential. Now I'm going to pass the baton to Andonnia, and she will start with reading a poem from Khalil Gibran. Andonnia, it's your turn to present.
Thank you. I'd just like to say thank you to Rosemary. That was just heartwarming and uplifting listening to what you had to share. And when I agreed to do this presentation, I did a lot of thinking about it and reflection. I thought, oh, what am I going to say? What am I going to share? And there was a number of things that or headings that came about, and I will share those. And I'll be sharing from a personal perspective and personal journey, having cared for my father and my mother and being a primary carer, and their passing, and also of my aunt, who was my second mum, and her passing. It's about 4 weeks now. So, but I always have liked Khalil Gibran and what he has to say in The Prophet. And I thought, what a nice way to just reflect on what death is. Okay. And so what Khalil Gibran wrote about death, it says, on death, and it always starts, then Alamitra spoke, saying, we would ask now of death. And he said, you would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl, whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day, cannot unveil the mystery of night. If you indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide onto the body of life. For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond. And like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. Okay. Trust the dreams, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity. Your fear of death is but the trembling of the shepherd when he stands before the king, whose hand is to be laid upon him in honor. Is the shepherd not joyful beneath his trembling, that shall wear the mark of the king? Yet is he not more mindful of his trembling? For what is it to die, to stand naked in the wind and melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing, but to free the breath from its restless tides, that may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountain top, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, shall you truly dance. And there's just so many layers to that when we think of impending death, but how life and death are so intertwined. And how is it that we're living, that we can then come to a place of a peaceful and restful death? How is it then that in our passing and in the passing of our loved ones, that they can be at peace and that they dance to another tune and into another dimension? So I wanted to start with that. Okay, so I've just got a few slides, but they've just got headings. So, and this is talking from my experience with my parents and my aunt, and with also with friends and other family members who have loved ones that are passing. And when I was sitting, being present and being a primary carer to my mum, being present was really, really important. And being one with spirit, being one with spirit, because in that role, you're not only the daughter, you're not only the carer, but I also worked So I worked from home, and I had the most gorgeous carer for Mum, and also worked from home 2 days a week, went to the office 2 days a week. And in all of this, I cannot dismiss what my brother's role in this was, because he cared for Mum for 2 days, the Wednesday and the Thursday, when I was in the office. And also being present meant that being centered, because there was the chaos, the family dramas. And how was it that I could be present in myself, to be really present with my mum? How could being present with her as she was struggling with her own mortality and her imminent death? And this was over like a 2 and 3 year period, and where she became from an active woman and slowly declining and becoming bedbound. And listening to her saying, how did I come to this? This is a woman who rode bareback. This is a woman who would plow the fields with horses and would reap the wheat with a scythe. No. So she was strong of mind and her physical being, and of spirit, and very connected with spirit. And being present to have long conversations. And that's what Rosemary was saying, those conversations of the past and the present and what the future was. Of when she passes, what does she want to wear? What flowers would she want? And there was no question about it. She wanted orchids. Orchids were her favorite flowers. So, and having the last rites, having the priest come into the home and accepting the last rites, and how at peace she was at that. And I'm going to end with Mum and I doing the precepts, and she understood. She understood Reiki. She understood spirit. She understood. So when I would wash her or dress her, it was always with Reiki hands and Reiki blessings. So it was really important that when there's this so many things happening on so many levels, to be really present and to pray and to have hands-on and just reciting the Reiki precepts constantly. Okay, so if I can have the next one. Okay. I found with my aunt especially, it's important to be the quiet observer. And what does a quiet observer mean? That does mean to be present. That means to be able to stand back and look in. And I really found that with my aunt. I would go on a Friday night and a Saturday night, and sometimes on a Sunday night when everybody had left. And so, because my cousin would be there from morning till the afternoon, and she would struggle. So I would go and sit with my aunt of an evening till 9, 10. And I want to go back to being the quiet observer with my cousin and with her family, because there was a lot of distress. And so this is when distant healing came in, and to stand back and to observe what was happening. And how do you step in? Because it wasn't my mum, this is my mum's sister. And so when was it right to step in and share about the death of. So it wasn't like I could go, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And so to have conversations with my cousin about her relationship with her mum and with her dad, and that I was saying to do the distant healing, and also about when she was really angry and she was really tired and that she had no life. What it could be like when her mum passes. And then when we're all in the room, kind of just to step back and observe what was happening, and what was happening especially with my aunt, and how to say gently, there's too much sound in the room, or to say, like when my uncle was holding her hand and he was just struggling, and he was saying, squeeze my hand, and just looking at him and sending Reiki and holding a sacred space for all of them. And when I would sit with my aunt, we would share stories. She would share stories with me about when she first came to Australia, and I was about 18 months old or 2, and she would share the stories of how I was cared by other women, and she observed the lack of care that I was getting and how she stepped in and looked after me. And I would say, well, now, Auntie, it's my turn. I'm stepping in, and I would feed her. And she would say to me, that's too much food on the spoon. Or that was the other thing that I would put my hands on to do Reiki, and the pain. And she would say, oh, that's too much. So just stepping back. And so being able to observe what is happening for that person at that time and for the family, and when to step in and when not to step in. And on the Saturday, which was the 31st of August when she passed, and, like my cousin, her children were there, which were the grandchildren, my uncle, and there's there can be a lot of noise and a lot of, touching and a lot of crying and the wailing. And it's to be able to be there with that. So that's really important. And when you step in and when you don't. So if we could go to the next one. Okay. Allowing the soul to transit peacefully. I want to go back to my dad. So in 2015, my dad went to Greece and he was not well. He had a fall in Singapore, managed to get himself to Greece, managed himself to get to our little town, and ended up in hospital. And the Greek hospital system, nothing like what we have here. So get a phone call the next day. I'm on a plane to Greece, and so I'm in the hospital with him for four weeks, and and I've got a Lilo on the floor, and the nurses are doing the best possible job they can. So if you can imagine 1 or 2 nurses caring for about 20 people. So, and again, caring for Dad, giving his medication, helping him shower, and again, prayer and Reiki. So Reiki the situation, and Reiki and prayer, let me get Dad home. Let me get Dad home back to Melbourne. Yep. And there was this beautiful, like little Byzantine church they built on the hospital premises, and outside there was a gorgeous statue of the Madonna, and I would go and I would pray, and hands on, and I would pray, let me get Dad home. and being with Dad. And so, and again, either hands-on or distant healing. In these situations, it would be a lot of distant healing and putting the word out to the greater beings, let us get home. And we did. And then Dad passed away on the 25th of September. That was only a few days ago. 2016. Now, I knew Dad was passing. I was at the end of the bed. I was doing a crossword, and I looked up. And if you can imagine, just in the movies when they drop something, so the newspaper just fell out of my hands, and I looked at the clock, and it was 11:20, and I knew he didn't have long to go. So this is about 12:20 now, and he's taking his last breaths. And somebody's really, like stroking and holding his hand, Mum's wailing, and I can see Dad, who's just coming to. So I had to go up, and I just put my hands on Dad. And I said, Dad. And it's about that permission, and it's about allowing that soul and that person to know you're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're going to miss you. And we're going to, yes, we're going to cry, but we're going to be okay. And so I was over Dad, and it was, Dad, it's okay. Mum's going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. Yes, we're going to miss you. And just very gently. And then he did this big gasp, and he went. And it's about, again, being present, what you observe. When is it time to step in? When is it time to say, enough? Who are we in mourning for? And how do we remain present in this time of this imminent passing of the loss and the grief, and just being. And so, and just then being able to sit with that body and with your loved one and still having a conversation with them. So, and with Mum. And again, I was sitting right next to her, and there was, she was really rattly in the chest. And then she got really quiet. And it was like, just in the quietness. And she left her body. And again, it's like being able to be there. And with Mum, we talked about her imminent death, as I was saying earlier, and about her fear of letting go. And she would sob and she would say, how am I going to leave my children? And I would, the reassurance of, your children are going to be okay, Mum. We're adults. And we don't want to see you in pain. And we would and we'll go into the next bit, which is really crucial to the healing of the relationship with my mum. So, and also, and Rosemary alluded to this, it's about healing and forgiveness. The relationship with my mum from a young child, especially when I was a young child in my adolescent years, was really fraught and very traumatic. And I made a choice to care for my mum. And so, and in those moments, the healing that took place was just exceptional. You know, as I was saying, there was always Reiki there, whether it was intentional, whether it was conscious or unconscious, it was being there. And I found this and I thought, how apt. And it says, forgiveness is the only way to heal your emotional wounds. Forgive those who hurt you, no matter what they've done, because you don't want to hurt yourself every time you remember what they did. When you can touch a wound and it doesn't hurt, then you know you have truly forgiven. And Mum would say, when I was 13, she went away to Greece with my brother and left me to care for my dad and my sister, who was 7 years younger. And she looked at me and she said, what was I thinking? What was I thinking when I left and I left you? And so that was so much healing to hear her say and apologize and recognize, or to say that how she treated me wasn't right, but also for me to say, you know what, Mum, it's okay. And I have forgiven and I loved you. And this is what you knew. And this is where we are now. And to allow that light to come in and to heal those wounds. And that was fundamentally one of the biggest things that occurred in that relationship with Mum, so that there was peace for the two of us. Okay. And so one of the things that we would do is we would recite the Reiki principles, or we would do the Lord's Prayer together. And I'd say, now, Mum, you've got to put your hands in Gasho, which is in prayer, in Prosevki. And so her little hands would come up into Gasho. So we would either do the Reiki principles, or we would do the Lord's Prayer. And one of the things that Mum did, which again was healing, she had come to America with me to Sundance, which is all part of a American Indian ceremony. And so she understood. So we would do the Lakota sacred songs. And and again, and that was about being present. This is about, how was I going to be this quiet observer with Mum, and allowing her soul to go peacefully and allowing me to be in peace. So the last thing I want to do is the Reiki precepts with Mum. So Slavica, this is where we're going to need to, the technology of, we might be saying you might need to, here we go. This is my mum. So, and we recited the precepts in Japanese. So I'm going to be handed over to Slavica on this one.
I'll be playing the video from my phone, and I hope you will hear it nice and well, and also be able to see it.
Good morning, everyone. This is Mum and I. It is Tuesday, the 19th of October, 2022, and Mum and I are going to recite the Reiki precepts. Okay, Mum? Okay? Kiyo dake wa ikaruna, shinpai suna, kansha shite, Kyo hakine, Hito ni Shinsetsu ni Hijitu ni Rabo Sana. Kiyodakewa Ikaruna Shinpai Suna Kansha Shite Takansha Shite Gyo Hajime Ito ni Shinsetsu ni Fabulous, Mom. Do you say? Fabulous. Okay. Dora, let's say thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Bye. Bye.
That was incredible. Thank you, Andonnia, for sharing this with us. I'm going to pass it on to you now to conclude.
So what I was saying is that I had to contain myself, because when we would say, come sit there, she'd actually say, come sit down. And for the Greeks among us, when another time when I said ikaruna, she said iburuna, which means uruna is a sow, a female pig. And so I just had to, like, I'd crack up laughing. So she had a really good sense of humor. And it's important to remember the Reiki principles, because it is about just for today. What are we going to let go of? And we're going to let go of the worry, and we're going to let go of anger. Have gratitude for the time that we've had with our loved ones, and how do we work hard, and how are we going to be, and that working hard is like, I'm going to be present, I'm going to be calm, I'm not going to lose my temper, I'm not going to yell, I'm not going to whatever, and how I'm going to be kind and compassionate to myself so that I can be kind and compassionate to others. So on that note, thank you. And thank you for everyone for being here and listening to this story and my observations of Reiki and the transitions of life. So thank you.
Thank you, Andonnia, for sharing your experience with your mom and your dad and your auntie. It was beautiful to hear your story, same as Rosemary's story as well. And now I'm going to thank you both for presenting. And I also want to thank all the attendees who came for this presentation. And I'm going to ask anyone if they have any questions that they want to ask either Rosemary or Andonnia. So is there anyone who wants to start up? I could start with a question actually, and I would ask Rosemary this question. It's more like a comment and a question. What really intrigued me when you were sharing your stories about the Reiki helping to bring the ease when it comes to talking about anything that is in the space at the time of someone transitioning. And I just want to ask you to tell me a little bit more about, were you needing to say anything to bring that ease of talking in space, or is it just naturally it happened as the Reiki was flowing? If you can just say a little bit more on that, that would be awesome.
A lot of the time it's about generally chatting. And once the conversation goes, I mean, there's a lot of times where there is no talk, but sometimes if you're alone with somebody giving them Reiki and they're in a hospital situation, they tend not to, it's different to being on a table. To me, I find it's different. They tend to want to try to communicate with you. And so sometimes I will just say little things about, that's a lovely photo of who is that you've got there in the frame on your side table? It can be little things like that, and they start talking, and then all of a sudden things unfold. And I may, without prying, I may say little things about, and how did you feel about that? Or there might be just something that you can lead them a bit further, because you get the feeling that there is more that wants to come out, and it's about just giving them the opportunity, allowing the conversation to flow. And there are so many times where I might not get the chance to do that, because if I go into a situation, say in a hospital or into somebody's home, and the family members are there, I very much disappear into the background, because I always think we've got to be aware of who this is about. And it's not about me. It's about the person transitioning and their family. And so I will often be just in the background or at the person's feet. So whether I'm doing it distantly or whether I'm doing it directly. And I can often feel that there's a bit of tension with the family. And so by using that distant, again, that communication on a distant level, it starts to unfold. It's amazing how we can have the power to do that. And I did find that with another gentleman that I'd been into, was my friend's father, and she'd asked me to go into the hospital. He'd been estranged from them for many, many years. He walked out of the family home when she was a child. She didn't know why. She hadn't seen him for many years, finally contacted him, tracked down where he was, contacted him to find that he was dying. And she had a couple of weeks in the home with him, went into the hospital. He was sent in to intensive care. She asked, could I go in? And so when I went in there, I wasn't allowed in, of course, because I wasn't family. My friend Viviana wasn't there at the time. So I just asked, could I sight him through a little window? Could I just glance where he was, so that I could sort of picture him in my mind? And then I sat outside, and I sat for a couple of hours just doing distant Reiki for him. And then I went home. When I went in the next day, as I promised I would, he was back in a little room, and he looked as if he was asleep when I arrived, and Viviana was there. And she said, oh, he's been asleep all the time. And as I spoke, his eyes opened, he looked at his daughter, smiled and held her hand, and then he looked at me. I was standing at his feet, and he said, there's my angel. Oh, you've come back to me. And we both thought he was maybe hallucinating. And he looked at his daughter and he said, this was my angel. She was with me yesterday, and she told me that everything was going to be okay, that I was loved, and that everything was okay, and she would help me through this. And I had told him that on a distant level. So to me, that brought out a chance for him to start talking to his daughter. He started to explain a few things about the way he felt with his daughter. Then they got into quite a deep situation, and I stepped out, because he started talking about why he left. There was a lot that unfolded. And she was also a Reiki channel, and she just sat and listened. She didn't stop him. She allowed it to flow. So I think there are several things that can open that up. It can be just on that level of Reiki to say, it's okay, it's safe, and you are loved, and you are safe. And I think above all, that's mostly what we want to hear. We can't always say you're going to get well, or you're going to be, but you are loved and you are safe at this moment, and I'm here. So I think that in itself starts them to say, okay, I can talk about this, and it unfolds. And mostly it'll unfold when the family is not there, because sometimes it can't. However, it'll often allow them to say what they really need to say to the family as well. So there's so many beautiful situations that can come about, I think, as long as we invest in that healing energy going to them.
Thank you so much. That makes perfect sense. But John, would you like to, moderate if any other questions have come up, or maybe you can ask a question, and I'll be back in a sec.
Andonnia, do you have any comments similar to what Rosemary was saying about how to encourage people to talk, or do you talk and how they open up? Does it happen organically, or is it encouraged? We all know it's a good thing if they do open up, because it releases pain and trauma, etc. So in your experience, have you found that, or how do you do it?
Okay, I can relate to what Rosemary was saying. And sometimes it is organic, and that, but the sheer fact you're sitting by them, and it's quiet. And I know with mum, dad, my aunt, and also with a number of other people, that they would just look, and they would open up and start telling stories. And like Rosemary was saying, like, whether you were doing the distant healing or the hands-on, and with the hands-on, they would let you know whether they wanted you to do the hands-on, either by a movement of their body, and I would continue giving Reiki, and then they would share a story. Like my aunt would go, "Oh, remember when?" And I'd go, "Oh yes, I remember when you were saying," or with mum, and they're talking about, and they would go back to what they would call the old days in their youth in Greece. Yeah. So, and also what Rosemary's saying was, if you're not part of the family, even if you are part of the family, how you would stand in the background, and that's what I was meaning by when you're the quiet observer. Okay. Yeah. And can I just add with my aunt, that when she was passing, everybody had left an hour beforehand, and it was my cousin, her daughter, and I. And again, we just sat and we observed how by this stage, the breath got shorter and shorter and shorter until, the breath had left their body. And it was how holding that space for my aunt and for my cousins and for I call her my niece. And at that time, also reciting the Reiki principles and the Lord's Prayer at that time, because she didn't want a priest there. But how is it by about just being? Okay, I hope that answered that question.
Pamela, do you have a question?
Thank you. My question is about, what is your method if you arrive after the person has passed, especially in situations where the loved one has passed suddenly and unexpectedly?
I still continue the same process. I guess it's also about, if the family members are there, it's about including them in that Reiki. But I've found from my experience that the spirit is very much around the body for quite a while. And so for me, the process is the same. It is about that nurturing. It is about still sending that Reiki energy for the full transition, because it can be quite startling for them to be outside of the body and viewing a body that to them they haven't realized how much they have deteriorated. They're not looking in mirrors as much. In the last few days, the body does really deteriorate. So it can be quite frightening for them as a spirit stepping out. It can be quite jarring. So that beautiful linking, I find that's a beautiful time to start linking them with the spirit, those in spirit that are coming around to greet them. And I have never, and I've been with a lot of people as they've passed, but I have never, ever seen it where somebody hasn't come in to nurture or to greet. And for me, it's about being that bridge between the spirit bodies that are coming in. So that is so important, that time. That's why I usually sit with them in the hours afterwards, if I'm able to, because that time is so important for that clear transition to link, to say, okay, I can move forward, because I think that's where we often have people who are stuck. So it's not always as easy in the case of an accident on the roadside. However, I have been at an accident on a roadside and helped with first aid, and the person has passed, and I have stayed there still nurturing until it was taken out of my hands. So I think it's so important. That time is so important. Does that answer your question?
I think as best you can, because it's, well, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hard to say. So if there wasn't anybody else around except for myself and my loved one, so it was, yeah, very unexpected. So, but that's essentially what I did when I had the opportunity, was to just sit and be in Reiki and be with my loved one. So thank you.
Okay.
Can I just say, sorry, to what Rosemary's saying, because from my experience and from is that, and even when it's a shock, it was be unexpected, like you were saying, Pamela. What do you do? Okay, because you would be in shock at the same time. Okay, so there's, do you call an ambulance? Do you call whatever? And about so important to maintain that centeredness and presence, and the spirit leaving the body and in such an unexpected way can be really confusing and can be really like, what am I doing outside of my body, and how are you? And I like the metaphor of the bridge, and how you're able to hold still that loved one and yourself, and talk to the spirit of the person. And I know there was, and you can also call in the spirit of the person, in distant healing, and hold them, and, like the passing. And also from a cultural point of view, and whether it was an unexpected passing or, an imminent passing, we hold the soul. So after the passing of somebody, in the way that I was taught in our tradition, we would put out food. We would put out food and a drink for that person for 3 days. And for 40 days, and my grandma, when I was with her in Greece, and my uncle had passed here in 88, she said, you don't even kill a fly. You don't know whether that is the soul of the person. For 40 days, we hold that soul. And then we have a church service, or we go to the gravesite, etc. And so what do we do then? Whether it, as we were saying, it was expected or unexpected, and how do you hold that spirit? And in the Lakota tradition, you can hold the spirit for a year and a day. Okay. So, and then they have what's called the wiping of the tears ceremony, the ending of the mourning period. So what do we do then? okay, whether, as we were saying, it's a shock, it wasn't unexpected, somebody has a heart attack or an accident, or it was. So how do we hold that spirit and allow that spirit to transition? So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Andonnia. Thank you, Pamela. Now we are 20 past 8, and I think it's time to wrap up this session. I just want to thank again Rosemary and Andonnia for sharing their wisdom, and for everyone else for joining in and participating, and for everyone who watches this presentation in the future. We hope that you find some insights and guidance on how to deal in this with these situations when you come across them. So thank you again, and we hope to see you for our future events. Thank you.